All right, welcome everybody to the Choral Pod episode 23 or 22, Zach.
You always ask me, and I'm never the person that knows.
I think
So
it's 22.
I
Um,
think you're probably right.
yeah, we'll go with 22. And this is a very special edition. Of course, you got Zach, you got Cam on the line, and we have a very special guest, Harper Stewart. Harper is a biomechanist. She works, she first of all has a great YouTube and Instagram, Biomech Talk. I love it. She is a PhD candidate at USC, and she also works hand in hand with USA Track and Field, which we are very appreciative of, working on, helping athletes move our bodies better. So great to have you on the pod.
Thanks for having me. Excited to talk with y'all today.
Yeah. And so I thought we could just open up just by, sort of maybe you just telling us a little bit about maybe your athletic background and how you got into, biomech type interests. Maybe was it from what you did as an athlete, or did you just always have those interests?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I guess kind of my backstory is I grew up playing a lot of sports. So when I was younger, I played soccer from a young age. I used to play field hockey. I was a cheerleader for a few years, and then in high school, I kind of transitioned into track. I was actually at our like soccer tryout, and the track coach would like come by to watch us run the mile, and then he would try and like poach people from that experience. So that was kind of how I got into track. Like one of my best friends, she was a really good runner on the team, and so her mom was always trying to pull people in. So I had a really good high school track experience and realized I was a little bit better at track than I was at soccer. So, I was always fast on the field, but not great ball control. So, yeah, so that was kind of my high school experience growing up. I was a pentathlete when I was in high school. I started that as like a way to try and make it to sectionals one year. So, once I went to sectionals for the first time, I kind of like caught the bug and I was like, oh, this is really fun. Like, let's see what we can do here.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my high school experience. And then I went to college at Bucknell University, and I was on the track team for 4 years there, which was an incredible time. We just had so much fun on that team. And I was a pentathlete and heptathlete outdoors, and that was a lot of fun. And I also majored in biomedical engineering. And so my second year, we took a class that was called biomechanics. And in the first couple of days of the class, our professor showed us some videos of sports biomechanics. And there was a video that Red Bull had done about Lolo Jones, and they were going through like they had basically set up a whole motion capture system outside for her to go through, I think, all 10 hurdles. And so basically the point of the video was that they were able to figure out how many warm-ups she should do before she started the meet. And I was like, wow, so practical. Like I would love to know like how many warm-ups I should be doing before I start my races. So I think that really caught my interest. And then just like the projects that we got to do in that class were really cool. We used a motion capture system, and my group actually did a study on golf. So we got to use force plates and motion capture to look at the golf swing of one of the girls in our group was on the golf team at Bucknell. So that was a really cool project. So I feel like that video like really excited me about biomechanics. And then I just kind of went on this path of like, how do I learn more about it? And I started doing research with a professor at Bucknell who actually did like impact testing for kids on playgrounds. So basically they would like drop this instrument which would figure out like how much force was going into the ground. So like if a kid were to fall off somewhere on the playground, like are they going to be safe and like not hurt their heads? Yeah, and then I moved to USC and then started my PhD in biomedical engineering, and my research is about biomechanics. So.
Wow, really interesting. And I guess my first question is like how many warm-ups did Lolo have to do?
I think it was 4. I think that was
Okay.
the optimal number. And I feel like she was going through like 3 or 4 hurdles. I don't think she was going through like all. the hurdles.
Yeah,
But don't
yeah.
quote me on that, definitely go watch the video.
Yeah. And I'm just curious because I want to know. I want to know how many run throughs I should do.
Right?
Four is like as many as I will want to do,
Hmm.
realistically. I don't know, Zach, how many do you do?
It depends on the day,
Yeah.
really. If I'm feeling really good, I might call it at 3.
Mm-hmm.
If I just can't find the board, it might end up 5 or 6. And then
Gotcha.
that's why, I mean, that's part of jumping is like strategic though. It's like you got to get on the board early and then, try to sit back and rest for as long as you can. So there's probably a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of a difference in between. Because like I mean, like hurdle races, I'm sure it's like everything's like very timed. Like you know exactly when to warm up and when to get on the track for your race, so you can like prescribe hurdle run throughs or whatever. But jumps, it seems like it's so all over the place. Like Cam, you and I have seen that at Chula Vista a few times, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Oh, us being all over the place?
No, I mean the moving the time, moving the flights, being
Oh
like, oh, there's
yeah.
2 flights now, there's 1 flight, so it's always subject to change. But anyway,
Oh, I see what you're saying. That's true. Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, that's just any track meet. It feels like even the big ones, even the really cool ones at Chula Vista, they are subject to some like what am I trying to say here? You know, it mixes up. They keep it exciting. Oh, you thought it was going to be 3 flights when it's actually one.
Exciting or stressful? Which one is it?
Keep you on your toes, man.
Yeah.
Um,
Anyway,
yeah,
back to what you guys were talking about.
sure, yeah. Okay, so I mean that's really cool. Like all that was very interesting. I mean, so first of all, shout out to Bucknell. I like was actually almost I was considering going there way back when. So
Really?
yeah. I talked to the coach and everything. It just seemed a little too cold for me. I'm a California boy. So although you're a California girl now too, USC, right?
Yeah, I guess I don't know. I was coming from Rochester, so Bucknell was
Okay.
actually warmer than where I was coming from. We've got the lake effect snow. So it wasn't too
Mm-hmm.
bad being in Pennsylvania, but yeah, the weather's so nice here. It's but it's nice to go back. I miss the four seasons, so that's my
Mm-hmm. Fair
point.
enough.
Yeah.
Well, we're gonna have some seasons this year. I was just reading about the El Nino, and I was like, oh boy, training outside is gonna be tough. But anyways, so I'm curious about how you got to start working with Team USA. How did that connection happen?
Yeah, so I got really lucky with that. So basically my advisor, Dr. Jill McNitt-Gray, she works in the USC Biomechanics Research Lab.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's worked at USC for over 30 years and she has worked with USA Track and Field for a long time. So there was another professor named Mel Ramey, who actually died, I think, a few years ago.
Mm-hmm.
But Jill and Dr. Ramey worked really closely together, and they actually got the force plates installed down at Chula Vista in the track.
Oh,
And then I think we've been providing feedback and data for like probably close to like 20 years. Like she's been doing it for a very long time. Um, at least since like 2013. So it's at least been 10. Um,
wow.
but yeah, so she's had this relationship with USA Track and Field for a number of years, and then PhD students that have been coming through our lab we'll travel to meets and we'll collect high-speed video and then also go down to the training center every now and then to collect force data and give feedback.
Mm-hmm.
So basically when I was coming on to USC, like I had seen on her website that, those were the different places that she worked with, and one of them was Chula Vista. And then I was looking up that was the Olympic Training Center for track, and I was like, wow, this is incredible. Like you couldn't have named like a more spot on like research, like
Yeah.
topic for me. So I was really thrilled about that. And then before I went to USC, like that summer, they asked me if I wanted to come to Outdoor Nationals, which was in Iowa at Drake State.
Mm.
So that was kind of my first experience with research was, taking high-speed video at that meet, which was really cool. So I got very lucky in that way that my advisor was kind of already doing that work, and she's established like really good relationships with folks in the horizontal jumps with USATF. So yeah, I've been privileged to kind of get to work with that whole group because of that.
Yeah. And just a question off the cuff, like, do you ever work with high jumpers too?
That's a good question. We haven't done a ton of work with high jumpers. I think that's still kind of a space where they need like a more full-time biomechanist to begin like looking at those
Mm,
athletes. But there is a lot of great work that was done by Jesus de Pena some years ago, like on high jump. So that research, if people are looking for like high jump tips, I would definitely like start with his work. So
gotcha. But for long jump tips, we should go to you.
yeah, Jill and I.
Okay. Well, can you break down what, like, I guess some surface level, stuff on long jump that maybe our listeners who are also jumpers might want to know about?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll do my best here. And
Sure.
then if you have questions as I'm going along, I'll just kind of talk through like what we do and how we use our methods and kind of give feedback to folks.
Mm,
So there's kind of like two setups that we have. So how I was talking about, we'll travel to meets and take high-speed video for the athletes. So basically what we'll do is set up at different areas along the track. So we'll typically have between like 3 and 5 cameras set up, depending on if it's long jump or triple jump. And then using those cameras, we're able to get different information. So we'll set up like a calibration because we need to know like what is a known distance in the space so that we're able to get distances and things like velocity.
mm,
So typically we have a video that's like zoomed in on the board so we can get incoming and outgoing velocity as the jumpers are taking off. And then we also have video sometimes of like the steps coming in, and then sometimes it'll be of the full jump so we can get the whole landing.
hmm
So Cam, we had made a video a while ago with your jump.
Yeah.
So people can kind of see like that was one of the videos that we would take from the meet. So you can get a sense of like what's the full projectile.
hmm
And so basically when we go to a meet, we're kind of processing all those videos, cropping them down so that we can get them back to the athletes. Because I think first and foremost, even before we start doing a more technical analysis, like just for you to be able to see like what you did in that meet is really important.
Yeah.
We really try and prioritize getting that data organized in a way that everybody gets feedback in like a timely way. So that's our main goal with that. And then, yeah, like I said, so we can get velocities coming from the video, and then also things like step length, jump distance, information like that. And then when we go to bigger meets like outdoor nationals, we'll give feedback to our athletes in like a PowerPoint,
Mm,
like template essentially. So we'll give them key metrics like their center mass velocity coming in, center mass velocity going out. And we'll also do like contact time, so how much time they're spending on the ground.
hmm
Um, so that's kind of like one part of our setup. And then
Okay. And really quickly for the
yeah,
contact time, do
yeah.
you have an ideal contact time for long jump and is it different for triple jump?
That's a good question. I think contact times, so everything, just to kind of caveat it, is going to be like individual depending on that
Yeah.
person. Your contact times for long and triple jump are going to be a bit longer than what you would see in like sprinting or
Mm,
yeah, basically like sprinting or trying to run fast, because you need a bit more time to generate the forces that you need to go from horizontal to vertical in those jumps. So typically those contact times are a bit longer, but it's like you don't want to be on the ground too long. So there's kind of
right.
like a sweet spot. I think most of our elite jumpers, I would need to double check this, but I think it's around like 0.125 seconds on the ground. That's like a pretty typical time that I've seen.
hmm
This is talking about like last contact on the
Take
board.
off.
Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
is that step? So that step is a little bit slower than maybe the prior steps. It's like especially the penultimate step.
Yeah. So I think as you're coming into the board, those contact times are likely going to be shorter than what you have actually on the board at takeoff.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. Yeah.
Zach, do you ever think about that when you're running? Like that your last few steps, like I know, we think we want to have quick steps, but do you ever think that your last step is actually a little bit longer?
Yeah. I think I knew that like your last step, like your takeoff is a little bit longer. Just because like the force that you need to put into the ground, like
Mm,
having like a really, really fast contact might not be good because you have to like go up, like kind of like what Harper was saying, like turning the horizontal into vertical. So if you're like too quick on the ground, then you're not necessarily getting as much force as you can to get up. But then if you take too long, I assume you might end up with like too much vertical.
right.
So you end up just kind of going like up and down instead of getting like that correct angle.
Okay.
Uh, that was my knowledge of it.
Hmm.
That's, I don't know. I like to think I like a last podcast I said a few times, I like to think I'm like a student of the sport, but I'm not anywhere near a PhD candidate in biomechanical stuff. So,
Yeah,
that
yeah.
take it as you will. Please correct me if I'm wrong or anything. So,
No, I think that's spot on. Like, there's kind of this sweet spot that we're talking about. It's like
Mm,
it's gonna be longer in comparison to sprinting, but it's not gonna be too long because like Zach, like you were saying, you can generate more force if you're on the ground longer, but then it's like if you're on the ground too long, a lot of what we see is like people will collapse
mm,
because the forces that you're generating are so high that it's like people can start to like you'll see it in the core a lot. So folks will kind of like bend over. Um, and then that's also not beneficial because you want as much of that force to transmit as possible. So yeah, it's kind of like this sweet spot. It would be good to like share some numbers on that so people kind of had an idea. But I don't
mm.
know. Yeah, like you're saying, it's interesting that you can kind of feel the difference like when you're coming into the jump about that last step does feel a little bit longer. Um, but I would also like not tell people to be like intentionally long either, because it's just going to be like a slight difference. It's not going to be huge. So,
Right, right. Yeah, I've always been cued that the last, what is it, I guess 3 or 4 steps are, your fastest steps, and you're really like they're faster, they're a little bit shorter, and the last step can be a little bit longer, but like you really want to think fast, and then
mhm.
you just pop off. And I guess I'm never really even thinking about that takeoff step. I'm always thinking about the steps leading up to it, because
Mm.
the takeoff step to me is already determined by the whatever 19 steps I took before. Um, right. And like the takeout step is just like all those forces culminating, and then I've done it. And all I gotta do is fight the over rotation, which kind of leads me to my next question. How, like, I know everything is sort of fixed based upon the run up, the approach, but how do you see athletes fighting that forward rotation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, so I think you're referencing the part of like once you're at takeoff, your center of mass velocities are basically going to be fixed. So
Hmm.
center of mass trajectory as you fly through the air, like as soon as your toe leaves the ground, that is going to be fixed. But I do think what's also important to caveat there is you get to control like how your body's oriented in space, like while you're doing that. Um,
Mm,
so Cam, like you're saying, like if you're trying to fight over rotation, something that we say to athletes a lot is stay longer. So that basically means, like you're holding your arms up, you're stretching your legs out and kind of staying in that long position before you're getting ready to kind of swing through and land. And something else that I think is interesting is so your center of mass trajectory is fixed and also your angular momentum is fixed.
mm.
But what's cool about that, especially with your arms and your legs, which my coach told me in college, but I didn't really understand why she was right. Like she emphasizes like you really need to swing your arms hard. And I was like, okay, like I trust you. And like it was working in meets, but I didn't get why. So
Yeah.
that's kind of like going back to the angular momentum conversation. Like if you're swinging your arms hard and fast, your legs have to come up to counter the angular momentum that you're bringing down. Um, so I think that's really cool. And then also the conversations about timing. So like when you do that is going to be really important. So I think
Mm.
some we'll see athletes like they'll swing a little bit too early and then like their legs come up and they'll be like almost parallel to the ground. But then it's like because they have so much time to fall before they get in the sand, their legs will drop after that.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of interesting conversations about like timing. So like there's things that you can do in the air, but just understand that like the majority of the distance that you're getting is fixed based on what you.
Mm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you swing too early or too late, you could really like sell your whole jump.
Mhm.
Like you know, you could lose a foot. I've lost foot. I mean, I have that problem. I swing too early all the time. And you know, being patient in the air is so hard.
Mhm.
But being longer is like a good I think it's a good cue that people can hold on to.
Mhm.
That's cool. I'm gonna try and hold that too. Oh, have you ever tried? I mean, this will have to be individualized to the runner, to the jumper, I should say. But have you ever tried to like pinpoint the exact time that someone should sweep and try to, and you know, over a bunch of videos that you've seen of somebody, try to sort of like represent that to them that, hey, you know, at this point you should sweep, you know, when you're sweeping too early or too late. And so we'll like maybe do a little beep sound in the air and then you can sweep that.
So you can practice. Yeah, I don't think we've
Yeah.
actually like done that, but that's a really interesting question. Like I wonder if you could, figure out what's the optimal time for someone to start that. Um, yeah, that's a really interesting question. And then trying to like cue them based on that. I wonder how that would go. Because
Because
you
coaches can make sound.
what?
Coaches can make sound out there, you know, they
Yeah,
can sweep.
yeah. They're all yelling.
Yeah,
So I had a question. You see a lot of times in long jump, there's kind of a debate between kind of like the hitch kick or like the hang method
yes.
of jumping. How have you seen differences in people that do one or the other, or whether they do like the full hitch kick versus like more of a like abbreviated one versus a hang, or just kind of like I want to know your opinions on if you think one is better or if you think they all kind of have their own way.
Yeah, that's a good question. These are like kind of my opinions, and I would definitely take everything with a grain of salt. But I think kind of going to back to the conversation we were having before about like um your linear and angular momentum is going to be fixed when you leave the ground. So regardless of if you're hitch kicking, double hitch kicking, like whatever your landing motion is, you still can't change that trajectory, which is going to make up most of your jump. But I think what the different techniques can get you is more helping with the timing conversation. So
Mm,
if one or the other helps you stay longer, or if the double hitch kick, maybe that gives you something to do in the air so that you can get your feet up at the end with that swing, then I think that that's beneficial. But I don't know if I would say, like this one's better, this one's worse, because it's probably going to depend on the person and what they're comfortable with. Um,
mm,
but yeah, I think just for jumpers to kind of keep those in mind, it's like probably more of a timing issue and then how you're able to go through that sweep in the time that you need to. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. That's what I kind of felt like it was going to be. Is it depends on the person,
Yeah.
but
mm,
I kind of changed my long jump form a couple years ago, 2 seasons ago, and I haven't been having like the greatest success with it.
Mhm.
Uh, and so I think that's just personally something I need to do to work on it and change and do what I need to do. But I was hoping there might be like, oh yeah, well we found that people that do the hang have like a little bit better timing, or the hitch kick has better timing. But I'll figure it out. I
Yeah.
wanted I wanted the cheat codes, but it's all right.
I
I,
wanted them to. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
the problem. There's always no cheat code.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's an
Well,
interesting question too, because I'm
yeah.
sure like other people have probably done studies on it. And so you might be able to, maybe there's a paper. I'm sure there's papers probably comparing the different techniques. But yeah, I think just based on the physics, that would be like my intuition is that it, is gonna depend. And I think it's also, you know, like people have different body sizes, like
Mm,
that's probably also going to have an effect. And like what's your strength, like what's your core, like how are you able to like really swing through those motions. So yeah, the landing's definitely an interesting conversation when you get into the different techniques for sure.
If you had to pick one that you thought would lead to the best outcome, which one would it be?
I don't know. Like, I think to me, the hitch kicks, it seems like you got a lot going on. Like,
Mm,
just from a control perspective, I feel like it would be easier to just like hold yourself up and then swing. But you know, that's also coming from like my experience. I only ever like I never tried to hitch kick or double hitch kick or anything.
mm,
So like from yeah, just from like a control perspective and not having to like deal with too much, I would think that would be easier. But then I've also seen, I feel like you see like Javon Harrison do some things in the air.
yeah.
There was another jumper down at Chula Vista. I feel like he might have been one of the Coro athletes, and he looked like he was doing like a couple different types of hitch. I don't know if it was a single or double hitch.
Oh, Trayton Harris, maybe.
Yeah, and it
Hmm.
seemed like his jump, it was very dependent on like how the timing of that went. Does that make
Yeah,
like he could have a really big jump or he could have a really small jump, depending on like how he got his feet up at the end, like how he got through that motion. So
right.
yeah, I feel like they just have different considerations. So I'm sorry, this is very academic. Like I'm not gonna give you a short
Oh,
answer.
that's okay. Well, I'm down to pontificate. I think that in a controlled environment, if the athlete, if you use the same athlete, and they're like proficient in both, controlled environment, they would do better in a hang than they would over like, in a bunch of different, I don't know, n equals 100, a bunch of them, as opposed to the hitch or the double hitch, because there's more that can go wrong to me in those. But that being said, if you think of it like a free throw, like in basketball, and it's just sort of like a repetition motion, if you can get through the whole thing and then you get your legs up at the end, like maybe you do get a little bit more stretch reflex because you're like swinging your arms and legs multiple times, so maybe you get more. But to me, I just think that there's more that can go wrong. It's a lot of timing and things to do in the air when you're already fatigued from, sprinting for 20 steps at least or something. And so, yeah, I mean, and like it's funny you're talking about Traden. Traden he's a great jumper, and like it looks really pretty when he lands it, when he like gets through his jump. But sometimes it can be like he can not get through it because he might be a little bit too forward rotated,
Mm.
where I wonder if he did a hang, whether that would happen, because in in the hang you have like the opposite problem. You're like leaning back too far, right? And so it's another interesting problem, at least for me in the hang. I don't have like too much of the forward rotation. I'm like hanging back too far. I don't swing and get my legs up fast enough. So, at least for me. But
And
that would be my guess.
yeah, something that made me think of too is I think Cam in our conversation a while ago, like when we were taking a look at your video, I thought it was
Mhm.
interesting what you said about you were like gonna try an experiment, I think, with the different types of hangs, and like
Mhm.
hitching just because you thought that would give you something to do in the air. I
Yeah.
think that's also an interesting perspective, like because how you guys are saying, you're up there for a long time. It's kind of like, what do I do with this time? So yeah, that's what I mean about I think there's different trade-offs depending on, like what your skills are and then what's kind of be gonna be most beneficial for you. But
Yeah, I was actually reflecting on that, thinking about the things I can do in the air, and I'm sort of stealing something I saw from Chris Bernard, who's a for the listener, he's a like Olympian, two-time Olympian, I think, triple jumper, great athlete, but he does triple jump, but he's in the air three times,
mhm.
right? And so he's got to figure out what to do sort of three times. And I noticed on all of his jumps, prior to his big jump, right, his last jump, he doesn't just hold his knee out. He drives his knee and then he lets it go down a little bit, and then he punches it again. right? Rather than trying to isometrically hold it out like you think you'd want to do in the triple, he lets it go down and then punches it back up. And like that second punch, I think gives him a little bit more power than it would if he just was gonna isometrically hold it. And I'm gonna try and take that to the long jump. When I because I do a hang, when I for all the listeners, when I jump, I'm gonna do my hang, but I'm not gonna just try and like isometrically hold my hands up or my arms up and then sweep. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna punch, like do my punch my arms up and hold, but let them come down a bit. And then right before I get to my sweep, I'm gonna punch my arms up again and then sweep, right? So I'll have that like quick action. And I think when I do that, my legs will come up a little bit too. And then I sweep, or I should say my knees will come up and then I'll sweep all the way down. It's a little experiment. But I think I'm going to try it because it seems to like work really well with Chris. And I think that that might give me a little bit something extra to do and like a little extra, like little cue so that I don't just get lazy in there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, it's hard to be up there for that long. So
Yeah.
good to try different things for sure.
Yeah. And that being said, like, Zach, your hitch is beautiful, man. Like it looks so good when you do
No,
it.
no, no, it's not. I have issues with my hitch that I could get into, but I don't want to because I don't want to think about it for at least another month and a half until I start
Mm,
doing some pit work again when I can actually try to adjust it. But
mhm.
I was more thinking this whole time I've been kind of like swirling something around in my head because you'd think that the hang would be easier because you're doing less in the air. But if you watch like the finals of an Olympic long jump competition or world championship, I feel like, you know, 7 out of 8 guys are pretty much doing a hitch kick.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if there's something there that once you get the hitch kick, whether it's the full 3.5 or the 2.5 or whatever, like the only long jumper I can think of right now who doesn't really have any sort of hitch is Simon Ehammer from Switzerland, I think.
Mm.
He's like the one
Yeah.
guy who's jumping big that's not actually having like a full cycle through the air to his landing. Everyone else that I can think of, the Jamaican guys this year, Dendy kind of has a 1/2 hitch.
Yeah. There's the other American guy with the
Tentaglue.
glasses.
Oh, Stephen McCarter.
Yeah, he does a
Yeah.
hang.
Does he? Okay. So 2 out of I feel like I can name 10.
Hey, we're out here. We're out here, man.
Yeah, it's a little strange. I feel like, you know, even like Mike Powell and Carl Lewis
Yeah.
back in the day. Uh the one really, really good jumper in history, I think is I don't know if he's French, but there was a Spanish guy and then I think a French guy who did a hang and jumped like 860, 870.
I know what you're
Um
talking about. It's an older video. It's like
yeah.
90s or 80s even.
Yeah, because I think the French guy now trains a couple young French long jumpers who are really good.
Mm.
And then I can't remember the Spanish guy's name, but I remember seeing a video of it. But I feel like most
Cardozo. Is that it?
Pedroso, I think is
Yep. Pedroso, yeah.
no, Ivan Pedroso. He was from Latin America somewhere. This is like a guy from Spain. I'm
Oh,
thinking
okay.
of. Yeah. But no, it's like when you get to the higher level, I feel like you see more people doing a hitch kick, and I don't know if it's because they they might think it's better, or if there actually might be something that when you finally get it down, like the timing
Mm.
might be a little bit easier to work with. But that was just kind of going around in my head for a bit. It was kind of the prevalence of the hitch kick versus the hang.
Definitely looks fly. So, if you're trying to be a showman, showwoman, that is something to do.
For sure.
Uh, yeah.
I was
Uh,
curious, you don't have to talk about it in detail because I know you need your month, but which did you start with one and then you're switching to the other? What's your switch happening?
Me?
Yeah.
mhm.
Oh, so throughout college, I kind of did like a it's kind of weird. It's like a hybrid, like 1/2. I call it a 1/2 hitch where you kind of cycle your legs once, end up in a like a knees down position, and then have the fold into the landing. Um, I started getting into trying to do like a 2.5 hitch of just being a little bit more fluid through the air. But my issue is, so I'm a left leg jumper. And so when I take off, my right leg comes up, it sweeps down, my left leg comes up, but it kind of hinges at the hip, and my left leg will stay up for like halfway through my flight. My left leg comes up and it'll just stay
Oh,
up. And then as I get close to the ground, the right leg comes up to meet it. But it's not staying up to the point where I'm getting like my heels coming down onto the sand. It's more of like my legs are dropping because I've held them up for so long.
yeah.
And it's kind of like a collapse into the sand. And so I need to figure out either going back to that pause and hang, or try to figure out a way to get my left leg to stay in like a 90-degree lock with my knee so it comes up and back down instead of my leg just kind of swinging up and staying there until I land. So it's the whole thing. That's why
Hmm.
I gotta workshop it quite a bit, see what's comfortable.
But some
Yeah,
people, they don't even do a full sweep at the end. They just let one leg hit and then the other leg follow, right? So you could try that too.
yeah, but I need another rotation of my left leg. That's the one
Okay.
thing, is it's okay if my right leg comes up, but my left leg can't stay up for half of my hang time in the air, or like my air time. My left leg can't just like stay there. I'm kind of like almost in like a split position. My right leg's trying to come through, but my left leg's already up and it's staying up there. The left leg needs to come down, the right leg needs to come up, and then the left leg needs to be, so it needs to be like a through, instead of just being like up, up. Like yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
Okay. Okay.
Hard
Well,
to
that
describe.
no,
It's just
I'm
weird and I
following
hate it.
actually. I'm following. I mean, that's the work, right? Like
Yeah.
that's the tweaking that we have to do, and like sometimes it's a little bit of homework. You go home, you watch a video, you see how it looked, see how it feels. But yeah, I mean, it's not as easy as just jumping and figuring out what to do. You got to practice it, people. So,
Yeah.
you know, even
It
us,
takes a lot
we're
of effort to change a landing too.
yeah.
You have to do it until it's muscle memory, and then now my muscle memory sucks because I think it's like not good form, and it's just a pain.
Yeah, I guess Harper, can you talk about muscle memory? Do you have any like I'm first of all tips about muscle memory, and then also, how real is it?
That's a good question. In our work, I don't do a ton with that. I feel like that's
Mm,
more like a S&C question, and also
mm,
there's you do like motor control as well. So I don't have a ton of experience, but I definitely think muscle memory is a thing. Like I remember my coaches in college, they would always joke that like athletes at Bucknell, like we were too smart for our own good. It was like you need to like shut off your brain and just like do the task at some point. Um,
yeah.
so I think, it's good like when you're in practice to be like thinking about stuff and trying to make improvements. But I think there's been a lot of work. This is coming from like a Twitter thread from this professor. His name is like Steve Magnus or something like that. I need
Mm,
to check what that is. But he had this thread about like when people are at their like top performances, and like you're never in your best performance state when you're like consciously thinking. So really being able to like get into that flow and just like do what you need to do. I think there's a lot to be said for that. Yeah, I don't know if that answers your question, but I do think,
mm.
there's muscle memory of like what you need to do in practice, and then trying to get into like this flow when you're in a competition.
Yeah. Do you work with flow at all?
What do you mean?
Yeah, that's a good question. Like, do you ever try to, like, let's say in at an event, a big event or whatever, you're filming, helping athletes and stuff. Do you ever ask them about what their mental state was? Were they in the flow state? Like say they had a really big jump or there's big variance between jumps or something. Do you ever try to tag that in the videos?
That's a good question. We definitely try and ask the athletes about how they're feeling. In
Mhm.
competition, it's a bit harder because they got to stay
Yeah.
focused. They're not talking to us, but like
Hmm.
when we go down to Chula Vista, like during a practice session, something that we like to do is be like, okay, like how did that one feel? So if they come back around, say they told Jeremy like how their jump felt, like I'm definitely trying to keep that in the log sheet, keep that information with the jumps.
Got it.
It's like when we go back and analyze things, like you're gonna have bad jumps in a practice, you're gonna have jumps that felt good in a practice. So we definitely want to keep track of those things because I think um there's a lot to be said for when a jump felt good versus when it felt really hard. So we talk about that as my professor likes to say, if your mechanics are working for you, a jump will feel good. And then if a jump feels really hard, usually there's something with your mechanics that wasn't quite right that can make it feel like, oh, I really
Hmm.
had to fight that one, or I really had to, I felt like I was pushing really hard. Whereas um, a lot of times, like when you're hitting the positions and doing the things that you're supposed to do, it will kind of just like flow and it should like feel good, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I've definitely had to fight some jumps for
Yeah.
sure. Okay, cool. And I know that you did like a bunch of I know that you spoke, you presented in that's Lando. I know you presented in Japan and in Colorado, right?
Mhm.
Can you talk a little bit about what you were presenting and showcasing?
Sure. Yeah. So in Japan, that was at the International Society of Biomechanics in Fukuoka, which was like a joint meeting with the Japanese Society of Biomechanics, and that was a really cool experience. So there's a couple of biomechanics conferences that folks will like travel around to, and they're basically like these big symposiums where people get together and talk about research.
Mm,
So I had a poster at that conference where I was talking about our research that we do with the Pac-12, which is basically a study that we were trying to figure out if we can detect when a distance runner is going to get a stress fracture. So I was talking through some results that we have on that. Hopefully my paper is in review, so we will see when that comes out soon.
okay. Can you
Uh,
talk about it or about your findings, or do you have to hold off?
A little bit. I think folks, if they want, they can go look up the poster.
Hmm.
But essentially what we were trying to do is basically take a look at the folks who got injured versus those who didn't get injured. We were looking at their ground reaction forces. So we were trying to look
Mm,
at different characteristics of those ground reaction forces to see, are there things that typically non-injured athletes are doing that are different from what the injured athletes are doing. Um,
okay.
so we found some interesting things there, but I'll save that so we get verification on the paper before putting
Fair
them.
enough.
So you'll
Okay.
see.
Fair enough. Well, maybe we'll in the like notes we'll put a link to the poster if it's available.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be great.
Because I'm shoot, I want to know, and I'll ask you offline. Which
I was going to ask if you've done something similar with jumpers and shin splints.
We haven't, but that is definitely a good question. Yeah, and I think kind of the value of the study too, which I think is cool, is we're kind of like setting forth a method that you could use in different applications. So,
mm,
like if you were to do a similar study with jumpers, I feel like that would be interesting because I don't know if it would make more sense to do um like in this we were basically just having the athletes do a steady state running pace, so they were either running at 7-minute pace or 5:30 pace, and then we're having them do a bunch of foot contacts so we can detect like a change in that
right.
pattern essentially. So yeah, that it would be interesting to do the same thing with jumpers and see if you could detect those things as well. So
Yeah, you could have the jumpers do like plyos, right? Like
Mhm.
they're I'm sure almost every jumper has daily, or if not daily, like every other day jumping drill plyo type stuff, whether it's like jumping over hurdles or just like jumping for height, skipping for distance, that type of stuff. That'd be interesting to see
Bounds.
it. Bounds, easy. Yeah, I mean, if you have shin splints, you probably will feel it after a few bounds. So
For sure.
you got shin splints right now, Zach?
They kind of come and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, something that I noticed, I had terrible shin splints when I was in high school and college, and then
Mhm.
like since college I've just been training, like just doing running, and my shin splints have gone away. So definitely my shin splints were a function of jumping, which is a bummer.
Yeah.
It could
I mean,
be.
it's such a, I mean, doing plyometrics is such a like a load on the calf and the tibialis, and I think that can be like a huge factor for shin splints, but
I
Do you
mean,
do,
it would make sense.
yeah, do you do your plyos like on grass for the most part, or do you do them?
Barefoot on grass for the most.
Okay, that's good. Hopefully that helps a little bit.
Oh, it for sure does. Yeah,
yeah.
that's been a great find. It's like, oh man, barefoot on the grass. I feel like I'm getting more work in, and my shins. So
Sorry, you froze. Say
A
that one more
plus.
time, Zach.
Oh, is the I feel like I'm getting more work in
Okay.
by doing barefoot in grass, and it feels like my shins aren't ripping off of my body. So that's a
Yeah, right.
huge plus.
Win-win.
And like you don't get the like you'll know if your heel drops, right, on a plyo if you don't have shoes. Because I don't know about the shoes you wear, Zach, but I wear, like Nike Pegasus 37s or whatever. And they have a big heel. And so it's kind of like cheating a little bit. Um, right? Like your heel could you might like not even realize that you're having a heel drop, but in when you don't have shoes on, you definitely feel it if your heel drops, and you'll feel it in more than one way. So
Yeah, yeah. No, I've been putting giant divots in the field where you can see my heel coming through on like bounds. Like I can like look back and see like every like meter and a half, 2 meters, there'll be like a divot for my heels, just like a
hmm
little cup size.
yeah. That'd
That's
be
awesome. That's like really good feedback for you to know though.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I lead with the heel, like it is digging into the ground.
Oh, dude, how's your? Didn't you like bruise your heel?
Oh, I've bruised my heel a few times, yeah, but that's mostly from like jumping at a meet.
Yeah.
Like on the grass, it doesn't matter. I just dig it in and it's fine.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just curious if like those two things led to each other. I don't know. I've never bruised my heel for real, so I'm thankful until I do triple jump this year and do it. I don't know, but
Yeah. I mean the heel is weird because it's like it's a fat pad on your heel. You don't actually have like muscle there. So it's
uh,
more of a I feel like it's more of like a bone bruise whenever you bruise your heel. So it
oh
takes a while
yeah,
to heal. And I mean it's a pain. Like I think it happens a lot because like the board is only so long. So like your foot
mm,
can only be on so much of the board. I feel like most of my shin splints have happened from like being really good on the board, but then there's the part where the track is, and the heel just like slams that when you take
hmm
off. So I feel like most of my heel bruises have been from like just slapping the track as hard as I can trying to jump.
yeah, totally.
Yeah.
So Harper, you said that you worked a lot with like force plates, right? It seems like that's a big part of data analysis. And my question is, so for the force plates, it's just like maybe, like a plate on when you're jumping, but what if is there some sort of substance that can be created that can put a force plate on the whole runway so you can get the data for all of it, not just like the last few steps or the last jump?
yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, the force plates that we have down at Chula Vista, there's kind of bays along the entire, or not the entire runway, but I think there's like 13 bays or something like that.
Okay.
So typically the one that we're getting is on the board, so we're trying to get takeoff. And then sometimes we'll set in a couple other plates at key instances. So like if we're doing triple
Mhm.
jump that day, we're trying to get like
Yeah.
all three of the contacts. And then if we're lucky, like we'll get a previous step, like say it's your like second or third step coming into the board,
hmm
long jump. So we might get that one too. But there's definitely other labs who have tried to set up like longer either it'll be like setting up an entire string of force plates is usually how people do that. I
Mhm.
think there's a lab in Japan where they have an entire sprint runway instrumented. So I think they have like a full 100 meters, or it's something crazy. Like in biomechanics, we're all like, wow, that's incredible that they have this.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
like complete runway. So yeah, usually the solution to that is just having more force plates.
Mhm.
It's just the problem is they're very expensive. It's a lot of
Mhm.
data and like equipment to manage. But it would be, super cool to have all of that information as you're coming into the run. But
Right, right. I mean, because if you could see that on your fifth step, there's always just some sort of drop in force for whatever reason. Your hips are dropping, or you're just like not keeping your steps,
Mhm.
not keeping the force fluid. Like that would be really helpful. Sometimes you can feel it. Uh, at least for me, I'm a pretty feely athlete. I can feel sort of if I'm not pushing well, but it would be great if I could have like that data. I mean, probably wouldn't be able to see it right after, like during the meet, I guess. They don't want the coach walking over with the phone, but like it would be cool for practice. And I'm just curious. Maybe we'll have to head out to Japan, Zach.
You have to get tested. Something just like as a way to get around that I would recommend to people, like if they're trying to
Hmm.
figure out, like say your fourth or fifth step, you feel like you're losing a lot of speed there. What you can do instead is like if you set up a tripod in the same position where say, I don't know how many steps you can get in, but whatever you can get with the video, as long as you're keeping that video in the same position over and over again, what you could do is like look at multiple attempts. So we do this
Hmm.
for athletes in Canovia. So if you take those two videos and you overlay, say you had a good attempt and a bad attempt, you should be able to see like, okay, if I line this up from takeoff, you can kind of do an analysis based on those overlays to figure out
Mm.
where that decreased. So kind of going back to the projectile motion stuff that we were talking about before, if you have like if your forces are lower, if your horizontal forces are lower, and your vertical, your step length or like the distance that you travel on the next step is going to be shorter. So like say you lost a lot of
Hmm.
force on one contact, that's going to be reflected in your next um like step essentially, like as you go through the air. So you should be able to use the video to kind of infer like, okay, I think on this step I'm losing something. Does that make
Right. So maybe for the listeners who are trying to reenact that, maybe you just put some tape on the ground where you put your tripod every day,
sense?
or every practice, and then you just always put it there. Then over a week or two, you can overlay and see,
Mhm.
and maybe mark the ones you thought were good, mark the ones you said that weren't good. Be real scientific about it, and you can
Mhm.
learn a lot. Okay, that's cool. I guess we don't need an entire force plated runway, but I still want one.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, it's almost like a scienced up version of just having like a mid mark or like
yeah.
I had a coach through college in my first 2 years of doing like unattached competing who he would have a mid mark and then a mark a few feet out from like the board,
Hmm.
and he would be able to tell like, okay, well, you were on at the mid but you were off here, so keep your speed at the end, or you were off your mid mark but so you were off at your last mark or whatever.
Hmm.
So it seems like it's just like having a much more scientific approach to having like kind of a mid mark cue.
Yeah, for
That makes sense. Okay, well, Harvard, do you have any other like maybe final tips for jumpers in particular? I got two questions. Two type of tips I'm hoping to get personally and just for the people. One, like, do you have any tips for how to stay healthy? Are there any like common things like hamstrings or whatever that whatever thoughts you might have on that, on how to avoid injuries, or are there things that we can do to avoid them, nurse them, that type of stuff? It's a big question, so I'll only ask one at a time.
okay. Yeah, that's a big question. Yeah, I think kind of like going back to what Zach was saying about the plyos, I think as much as you can trying to find opportunities to do like your drills and your training on different surfaces is really going to help. So like if you have grass available, like definitely trying to get out there on the grass.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think just like keeping in mind for the jumpers, like in order for you to jump far, you have to generate like very high forces, and you also need to be able to control them. So I think as much as you can, getting in the weight room and trying to put in the work there so you know that you have the strength and the capacity to handle those. And then this is kind of like a side tip. This might be more like performance related. But I
Mm-hmm.
think something that we talk about with our athletes a lot is like focusing on their core, and not just like, having a strong core for the sake of having a strong core, but being able to, I think Jeremy does a lot of this in his videos, so that might be a good place to start. I think he has good exercises there, but you need to have like a dynamic control of your core. So you need to be able to, like raise your leg, like as you pull that knee through, you need to be able to keep your core strong there. And I think that's something we see. That's something my professor says, like, she studied elite athletes across like so many different sports. And that's like a really common thing is these athletes who are really at the top, like they have incredibly good control over their core. So
Mm-hmm.
that's something to keep in mind. And then just like also having the ability to bail out also, like we've seen some really nasty situations, where somebody's knee will like go the other way. So it's really important to be able to like learn how to fall. um
Yeah.
so that's like an extreme situation, but we always talk about like it's helpful, especially for jumpers, like if you have a gymnastics place available to you to like get reps in and like learn how to kind of work in these different situations, I think can be really helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
think in the break. Oh, go ahead. Finish.
no, yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say in the breakdance world, they call that canceling, right? You got to cancel. You got to be able to do that. You know, I think we saw that in the NBA, a lot of high flyers or whatever in the early 2000s and 2010s were landing.
Mhm.
After a big layup or dunk or whatever, they just land on one knee or two knees, and then I don't want to name people, but then they blew out their knees or whatever.
Oh, I mean
Um,
like Derrick Rose.
R.I.P. Yeah. Exactly. While where now people are taught to fall and not absorb all that, right? People would always sort of mess with Dwayne Wade because he would always be on the ground, but he did that because it's saving his body, right? And also you get the foul. But like putting that in the track context, if you're over rotated and you take off and that and you're not going to land well, don't just like land on your leg. Don't just like land like sit straight legged and
Yeah,
eat that,
seriously.
because you might be able to eat it once, but I mean, why test your body like that? um just land on your butt or just fall, like,
It's sand. Land on your face. Like, what are you gonna? What are you
honestly.
gonna do? I mean, look at Kerry McLeod at the U.S. or the World Championships.
Yeah,
He had that
yeah.
one attempt where he just bounced off the board, over rotated, and just took the spill in the sand. But it's sand. Like, it's not gonna kill you.
Right. Imagine if he tried to like front flip it or like land on his feet or anything. Although
Yeah,
I
if you try
think
to stick a leg out, he was like Supermaned out. Like if he tried to put a leg out to land, he could have like seriously injured himself. But
mhm.
he just took it face first, which good for him.
Hey, clicks, man.
Yeah,
It was, he's got a cool little highlight, and that was like 8 meters anyways.
it was. He landed
It's
at 8 meters.
crazy.
That was the wildest thing. That's insane.
Superman. I mean,
Yeah.
that makes me think about another thing. Like, I know it's banned, but the front flip, I wonder if that's like,
I have strong opinions about it. I don't know if they're correct opinions, but I have strong opinions.
seems like you're anti front flip. I'm pro
Yeah,
if it doesn't hurt you.
I'm very much anti. I think part of long jump is you have to have an equilibrium of your mass. If you
Mm,
just end up doing a front flip, like you're almost cutting that off and like going like shorter, right? So
oh,
you'd be hitting the sand too soon because you're not actually keeping that balance through the air.
What do you think, Harper?
I feel like it might go back to our hitch kick conversation.
It depends. Fair enough, fair enough. Okay, so cool. That was question number one about, like, injuries and stuff. And then for, like, if there were a few things that people could do to take away from this conversation to sort of get better, what would those things be for you? I know, like, lifting and having a strong core kind of go hand in hand, like, with getting better. So maybe, some other things. Are there any drills that you see are really effective? Like, what do you see that works well?
Yeah, we don't do a ton with specific drills, so I won't comment on that. But I think going back to something you were talking about earlier, Cam, is I think, like, today we talked about landings, which I think is really important, especially if you're on that elite level. But I would say for a lot of, like, the up and coming jumpers, like people in high school, even people in college, I would just really take a lot of time to work on your speed, because, like, that center of mass trajectory is going to be a function of how much speed you're able to bring into the board. And then not only that, like, once you're in contact with the board, how you're able to manage and control those forces.
Mhm.
So I think people would get a lot of bang for their buck if they spent more time working on their approaches. So I think that would kind of be my main words of wisdom, is like, try and, make sure you got everything under control there. And then not only like getting that speed, but also making sure that you can replicate it and do that over and over again. Because we see, I think a huge issue for jumpers is like fouling all the time. So like, you got to give yourself that opportunity in finals, and you can't do that if you fouled a bunch of your jumps. So if kind of you can go back to these conversations that we were having about projectile motion, like thinking about how each step you're turning into a mini projectile, and then that's going to change your position on the board. So yeah, I think working on your speed and then working on like the strength and control as you go through that last contact, so you're able to kind of manage what's happening on the board. Yeah.
Right on. That seems right to me, feels right to me. And even if you are an elite athlete, still the approach is something, I focus almost more on the approach now than I do on the jump, because I mean, I do foul a lot, one, and two, I just want to, like, if you're faster, you'll jump farther. Right. So you can get that going. That's a really good tip, because I think a lot of people focus so much on the jump, they forget that most of the jump is the run. Right. I mean, you're running longer than you're jumping. I mean, unless you can figure it out and fly. But anyways, cool. Well, Harper, we really appreciate having you on. Like, it was really cool. Great to pick your brain, learn a little bit more about what's going on the science side of track and field and long jump in particular. I'm gonna take some things. I'm gonna for sure try to be in the air longer, longer, I should say. I think that's a cool little tip, a little thing I can take. Zach, any final thoughts before we dip?
No, not really. I mean, I personally, I kind of go back and forth between, like, yeah, I want to know the latest information and like the latest technology, and then part of me is like, I just want to be like a caveman in the sport and just do it all by feel and all by just figuring it out, like eyes on. Um, so I don't know. I'm going to be interested more probably moving forward into some like biomechanical stuff, when I can, because I can't always, take video of myself or have eyes on. It's going to be a lot of feel for me, but um, yeah, I think this is really cool. It's a lot of information to think about and to kind of choose how I want to absorb it. Um, yeah, no, it was fun.
Cool, right on. And maybe we'll have you on again, Harper. You can talk a little bit more about your paper once it's out and validated, like you said. And then yeah, when we're closer to the season, we'll have like, I'm sure, deeper opinions on things. It's like, no, I'm doing the hang and it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey, Harper, really appreciate it. And for the people, how can they find you?
Oh, yeah, first of all, thank you both for having me on. This was a great conversation. I really appreciate the, just opportunity to talk about track. So, and I also I love the work that you're doing with Coro and, the thing that you're trying to do with getting the track league started. So I think that's all super valuable. So just like props to you on all that. If people are interested, they can go to harperestewart.com. And then my Instagram and social media, like YouTube and stuff, is all Harper E. Stewart. So you can check Biomech Talk out there if you're interested. So yeah.
That's right, Harper E. Stewart. And then, if you type in like maybe hashtag biomech talk people, you will get a great video series of different types of jumps and runners and things like that. And you might even see my face on one of them. Actually, you will. I think at least one. So yeah, appreciate it. Thank you everyone for listening, tuning in. And Zach, where can they find you? Just in case they were looking, although they already know.
If you walk around San Diego enough, you will find me. Um, Social media, belts, jumps, BLTZZ_jumps with the Z. A lot of Z's there. Coro, you can find me where my name is. Just Zach Belts, ZACH, spelled right.
That's right. And yeah, for me, Cam the Man Van on socials, I think. And then I'm also on Coro, but feel free to DM whatever if you have any questions for the next stuff. If you want to come on the pod, let us know. We'll try to slide you in. And otherwise, check the show notes for all of Harper's stuff. We'll put that there. And appreciate you listening this far, and we'll catch you next time, folks.
Thank you.